for that.
Well, 5 years ago, the pandemic was about to become real for a lot of us. On March 12th, 2020 was when sports leagues shut down. People started to pay attention to COVID, and within a week, we'd all be sheltering at home.
12 News journalist William Pitts is here with a look at 5 years ago. William, this is so weird because in some ways, doesn't it seem like it was way, way longer than that? And then some days it feels like it was yesterday.
It really does. We were talking about this earlier. It all feels like 12 years passed in the last 5 years, but also like it just happened. And thankfully, we are kind of as back to normal as we've ever been. But 5 years ago, there was a period of a couple of hours that felt like absolutely everything was crashing down. And it started with, you'll probably remember, America's dad, Tom Hanks. He got COVID in Australia, and that's when people really started paying attention. Then that night, the NBA stopped a Utah Jazz game because one of the players tested positive. The other leagues followed, and then people really paid attention after that. 3 days later, we were all out of the office here at 12 News. Our newscast went remote. You probably remember all of our living rooms. Social distancing was the phrase of the year. You stayed 6 feet from everyone, and by the end of the month, there was a full statewide shutdown. The streets were empty. You could only go out if you were considered an essential worker. 5 years ago, we'd never even heard of Zoom. Believe that? I can't believe that. Sometimes you use FaceTime, but really not that much. Skype was the video calling giant that the world used, if it used it at all. And 5 years ago, we were looking for someone to demonstrate how video conferencing would work for us so we could show you. Now, 5 years later, Skype is out of business. Everyone knows what a Zoom meeting is, and there are people who have never physically met their coworkers. I was out of the office for 2.5 years before I got a desk again.
And see, that's wild to me. We had some of our co-anchoring teams, remotely working from home and things of that nature. And then some of us just were strictly allowed to only come into the building, essential workers and whatnot.
No two anchors at the same time,
correct.
At the same place.
Same floor.
Case. Exactly. And speaking of which, I want to show you something that our digital director snapped 5 years ago. Take a look at this. This is what we were working on right before everything changed. Is telemedicine safe? That's in this list. What about schools? What's that going to mean for tourism? I mean, it would mean a lot for tourism. We had absolutely no idea how long and how transforming this would be. Those were our story lists. This was the last day that we were in the office. That wall stayed untouched for almost 2 years before it had to be painted over. When
sports was one of the first people back in the building. I remember passing that wall every day, being like, still hasn't changed, still hasn't changed, still hasn't changed. And you're right, it stayed that way for a long time.
It's a little triggering, I know.
I think we found out, though, you made a great point, is telemedicine safe? I think we found out the things we really can do well remotely. I think telemedicine might be one of them, right? And things that just don't work as well, and Zooms, I hate Zoom meetings. Can I just tell you that?
It's always nice to be in person.
And
right.
interviews,
see your coworker, right?
Interviews, too. Now it's an absolute necessity. If we have to do a Zoom, it has to really... need to be.
And this morning when this was all brought up, like it's weird to look back at some of that time and looking back at some of the things that happened in sports over that year. It's not a fun memory. I mean, but there are a lot of more important things that year that happened in sports. But here's some of the things that we kind of found digging through our archives.
Okay, what do you got?
I remember watching the NBA shut down and kind of that scene unfolding. Then the avalanche, the NCAA canceled March Madness. All you saw was video of empty arenas all across the country. Like it's an eerie to see that, right? I was there in Scottsdale when spring training shut down. Players and coaches were on the phone with their families, like just trying to get like life in order, guys. Sports didn't matter whatsoever. Baseball, of course, returned that fall. Everybody was in masks, but I'll say this, it was weird, but it was nice to be out of the house, like be back in a building that you knew something was gonna happen in, right? Everybody doing their part, including D-backs manager, Torey Lovello. You remember those cardboard fans?
Yes.
Everybody's faces. By the way, this is what a home run sounded like during COVID. That complete silence. Wow. Absolutely nothing, right? Sports from home was a thing. So many Zoom interviews as we've talked about. But what I'll remember most is talking to and doing stories on those true heroes, the medical workers like former ASU women's basketball player Michelle Tom. Her work on the Navajo Nation, and I can't say this enough, truly saved lives. Sports teams tried to make things feel normal. There were drive-through fan events all across the valley. That was kind of cool. Sports from home was fun. If you did it at your house, we put it on TV. I also hit golf balls at my stove over and over again.
Nice.
Just for
Whoa,
fun, right?
I'm sure your landlord loved that.
Yeah, not at all. The NBA and WNBA returned later that summer in bubbles. That was also during the George Floyd and Black Lives Matters protests. We also got that magical almost playoff run by the Suns. That was the rebirth that put this franchise back on the map. Devin Booker leading the charge. Look at Cardinals training camp. Nobody in the stands. That was, by the way, also Larry Fitzgerald's last camp and season. State Farm Stadium also that year became a site for a number of blood drives throughout the fall, which was really cool. Games opened to no fans, then some fans.
I was there for that first game. It was Seattle, right?
Yeah.
That was weird. I could hear the guy 4 sections over going, yeah, you stink, to whoever. And I'm like, I shouldn't be hearing that guy.
And then later that year, guys, you may remember, we got one of the greatest moments in Cardinals history with a near empty building.
Slips a tackle, got to launch it. He does. Left side, into the end zone, jump ball, and it is. Is it caught? Is it caught? Oh my goodness, it's caught. DeAndre Hopkins caught it. He caught it for a touchdown with 1 second left. I can't believe it.
Tiene un receptor en el terreno. ¡Lo atrapó! ¡Lo atrapó! ¡Me quito el sombrero! ¡Me quito el saco! ¡El milagro ocurrió! ¡El milagro, Rolando! ¡Bríncale, bríncale! ¡El caballo! DeAndre Hopkins solo!
Most of the time you would hear fans and people go nuts, right? The building, the crowd would be so loud.
Yeah.
But that's what it looked like, a near half-empty stadium for the Hail Murray, Kyler Murray to DeAndre Hopkins, and the Cardinals beat the Bills. Very weird time in sports, to say the least. But I will say, we got to meet a lot of cool people that came up with a different way to do life all throughout this time, and everybody included. And then getting to meet some of the healthcare workers and people who really changed lives and saved lives was the kind of the things that I'll always remember. It was a weird time in sports. Sports could never have been less important during that time, but it was really cool to gather back together for sporting events.
Yeah, it's also very important at the same time, right?
Exactly,
You said it wasn't less, but you had to have something to take your mind off all the craziness.
And that was the piece when it kind of came back together. Is those were things like, if I remember, people looking forward to doing together.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, it's hard to believe 5 years ago. Gentlemen, thank you. Yeah. Right after the break, more people shopping in person, kind of that back to normal. In fact, 5 new stores opening up at